read to VMware and storage engineers on how to upgrade a Windows SRM instance to a SRM Photon appliance along with corresponding SRA adapter. In this specific instance, it will be I'll be more focused on upgrading a Windows SRM instance 8.3 with Nutanix SRA adapter 2.5.0.1 to SRM Photon appliance 8.3 with the Nutanix SRA 3.0, and then do a stepped upgrade all the way to SRM 8.5. I really wanted to go with SRM Windows SRM 8.2, but I was unable to download it from the VMware side because the rate or the furthest they go is 8.3. So in order to demonstrate this process, I had to deploy the environment. So let me quickly sort of give you a view of the environment. So this environment consists of 2 vCenters. One is a Sydney vCenter. The other one is a Canberra vCenter. Of course, these are all virtual. These were effectively just built to demonstrate this whole process. So that's at a high level. These are the 2 vCenters because, as you know, SRM works with a site pair, so you need to have 2 vCenters. Now I have not done the enhanced link mode where you log into one vCenter and you can see. I should have done it, but I didn't have time to do that. So that's one element. Then I have 2 instances of Windows SRM. So if I go to the Windows the Sydney vCenter, you will see that's the Windows instance of SRM. Just do a while that's coming up, I will get the other one too. So that's a Canberra instance of the Windows SRM instance. So effectively, there are, I think that is Windows 2019 servers. Yeah, purely I build them so that so that's one of the elements. I will go into details later. And then I also had to build 2 instances of as Nutanix clusters. So where are they? Okay, here we go. I will just so that's the Sydney Nutanix cluster. So what you're seeing is Nutanix GUI interface, which is equivalent to what's the Windows ESXi DCUI, Direct Console User Interface, effectively the 443 interface onto ESXi. This is a similar interface for managing a Nutanix cluster. Now this is called Prism, and the vCenter equivalent of this Prism would be Prism Central. I haven't deployed a Prism Central in this environment yet, which I will do at some point in time. So just want to have that. Now, just to let you know, if you have a look, Nutanix clusters. Nutanix can be deployed. When you deploy Nutanix, it supports multiple hypervisors. It supports its own hypervisor, which is called They call it AHV, which supports ESXi, Hyper-V, Citrix Hypervisor, formerly Zen server. So I have deployed this ESX Nutanix cluster based on ESXi hypervisor. That's why you see hypervisor as ESXi and it's 7.3. So that's one thing. And then after you deploy the Nutanix cluster, right? Effectively, in this instance, we are using Nutanix distributed storage, similar to VMware's vSAN or Nutanix distributed storage as our backend storage, similar to in some of the environments where you will be using SRM with NetApp backend, or you will be using SRM with uh, VMAX or PMAX, or you could be using SRM with HP's different backend storage technologies. So in this instance, we are using Nutanix as the backend storage. Now, if I can sort of give you a quick no, I don't know. I can't find that. No, that's not what I was after. Yeah, that's the, so effectively what what Nutanix is providing us is this. You got at the top layer you got a vSphere cluster with multiple vSphere ESXi physical nodes, or nested virtual nodes. And in this case, in my case, it's a single node with a ESXi hypervisor, and underneath that, this storage pool or distributed storage is provided by Nutanix. Right. So now, after you deploy Nutanix cluster, there are certain steps that you need to go through. At a high level, you got to create a storage container. That's what Nutanix call it. And then you need to create placeholder containers and ESXi data stores. Then you need to build the Nutanix remote site configuration in both clusters with vStorage mapping. Now, one thing you need to be aware is this need to be done via the Nutanix CLI, which they call NCLI. There is no GUI option for this. Like at the beginning, I got sort of stumped, or it took me a while to figure that out, because I was doing it via the GUI and I couldn't establish a site pair. I was able to establish site pair, but the device discovery didn't happen. And then you need to protect the vStores on the protected site. This is all using the Nutanix cluster environment, Nutanix tools, Nutanix command lines, etc. And then you need to add schedules to the protection domains. That's similar to if you're using a VMAX, PMAX, the asynchronous replication happens automatically, right? When you set up a SRDF replication. But if you take for example, via NetApp environment, when you establish a SnapMeter relationship, you need to have a schedule where this is as far as it's asynchronous, right? You need to have the schedule, right? So similarly, you need to add a schedule to protected domains. That's what they call in Nutanix. And then you got to move VMs to the defined data store, which is replicated. So then the next step is install the Nutanix SRA adapter on the Windows SRM, create a site. So that what I just explained to you now is what is already existing. So from here, this is partly because I want to get the environment built to assist one of my colleagues who's effectively going to upgrade SRM from Windows version to the appliance version, and that is going from 8.3 Windows to 8.3 appliance. You can't go from 8.3 Windows to 8.5 appliance because you got to import the configuration, and the configuration is understood at a stepped level. So this whole exercise is to assist him with the steps which is required, right? So right at this point in time, I almost have. I wouldn't say it's identical because there are certain limitations in my home lab that way I can't get that identical environment as my colleague's environment. But uh, this is the best I could do. So now I just want to quickly show you, right? So I've shown you the vCenters. I've shown you the SRM Windows appliances. Shown you the backend storage in this case, which is Nutanix. And the next is I want to show you the SRM configuration for the existing SRM configuration. So this is what it looks like. So have a look at here. Some of the mistakes are made. Like here, you can. Okay, it's for your day-to-day understanding about SRM and how to deal with. Normally, you can access SRM GUI plugin from the vCenter. So generally, what you do is, you'll have a site recovery plugin here, and you'll go then. This is what you should see, right? Now, if I had enhanced link mode, I would see the Sydney and the Canberra, but in this case, because I don't have the enhanced link mode, that the Canberra instance you can't see. But even the Sydney instance, you see some errors here, right? This is because, like I said at the beginning, I have limitations. I cannot replicate exactly my colleague's environment because I'm running my bare metal environment of my lab using ESXi 8 and vCenter 8. I need to do that because that gives me the ability to deploy anything below like 7, 6.7, etc. But if I have my base environment with a 7 or a 6.7, I cannot bring anything higher. And I need to have this environment in my home lab so that I can do various kind of testings for, whenever my friends, colleagues, require assistance, or for my own self, right, with my work environment. So what I want to show you here is if you can't get to your SRM from vCenter, the way you get there is this. So this URL effectively what it's referring to is your SRM server name. So now in this case, at this point in time, this is a Windows SRM instance /dir. So now when you go there, everything looks fine. Now I have seen many production environments where this is completely messed up, right? Because their vCenter infrastructure is not solid. But don't get worried or think, oh, I know SRM is broken because it's broken here. It's effectively a quite independent. It can function independently, right? I mean, obviously, it needs to talk to the vCenters, but I just want to show this as example. So, having said that, now what we are looking at is the demo SRM environment I have built, right? So at the moment, it has a single site pair, like what you can see. And then it has one protection group and one recovery plan. So let me just go into view details, and this is where now I'm getting into the SRM GUI. Now the reason that you see this login is now it wants us to talk to both sides of the SRM. So I was in the Sydney one, now I need to talk to the Canberra SRM instance so that it can demonstrate, show you, and got to effectively make sure that you have permissions on both ends, right? Now if I had enhanced link mode enabled, this won't pop up, but in this case, because I don't have it, I have to sort of log in here. So this is the base screen. You will see some of the things that you need to pay attention here. All you need to know is at the top it will tell you the vCenter instance, and it will tell you the vCenter version, right? And this is all very vCenter specific. Now if you drop this down, again, that's the vCenter reference, right? And you see here, what you see is the IP address of the SRM appliance. Now this is something I want to really emphasize. This is a mistake I made. I kind of did it purposely because I want to demonstrate, right? So, and I don't know whether you can recall. So you see in the URL here, it's pointing to an IP address, right? But here I actually went using the FQDN, but it sort of immediate. Now this is because when I deployed the SRM at the deployment stage, there is an option where you can give the short name, you can give the long FQDN, or you can give the IP address. Never give the IP address, never give the short name. Always give the full FQDN, because if you know, I'm sure you know about how DNS name resolution works. And if your DNS infrastructure within your enterprise is not properly structured, not properly built, if it's not properly designed, by having a short name, you will run into problems. Now, obviously, you don't want to have an IP address because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, by me looking at that IP address, I have no idea whether it's the Canberra or the Melbourne one, right? Or you can't remember all these LAN segments and everything. That's the whole purpose of having a friendly name, right? FKDNs. So I just want to make sure. So because I will emphasize it into my colleague, right, who's going to deploy that. He has to make sure that a FQDN is available before he starts deploying the appliance. So at this point in time, you can see that, and here it tells you the version of SRM. And then let's keep just quickly going down a few things. It's no issues. And now you're going to storage replication adapter. This is the SRA part of it. Now again, there's a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings about the role SRA in SRM. Effectively, I would say SRA is the brain of storage-based replication within a SRM implementation. So SRA is the one. So SRM sends instructions to SRA, and SRA talks to your backend storage, executes all instructions, comes back and tells SRM, I've done my part. Now, just let's keep moving forward with your other automation stuff, right? This is kind of very relevant, especially in the NetApp in implementation of SRA. And I will have a different video on how to deploy SRM, SRA specifically for NetApp. And in that, NetApp has really gone and confused engineers. I've seen many engineers confused for months and months because they could not untangle that component. But I won't go into details here now. But I just want to emphasize the the SRA component. So as you can see here, what you're seeing is it says Nutanix SRA, its version, where it's installed. So by looking at this, you will know that it's a Windows install and its version number. Now, so here you see the Sydney instance, and there you say. Now, one of the things you could or should do is just do a rescan adapter, right? And if everything works fine in the context of SRM talking to SRA, and the SRA talking to all the way back to the storage adapter, storage backend, you will be able to confirm that it all is good, right? So if I do this one now, like continue, I will just go back here and then say do the same thing, and you will see down below, it's sort of doing its thing. If it has problems, it will come up here with the red, cross. So that's that bit. Then create the array pair. Now, one thing you need to be conscious is your backend storage source and the target, or primary or the secondary or whatever you can be, active, passive. That relationship, that replication has to be 100% before you can see this environment here. So if that is not configured, you will start having problems here. You won't see this relationship. Now, I'm not going into how it was created and etc. So for example, if I go add, right, and I go next, right? So this is the sequence that you go through in order to create that array pair. Now, this sequence is different to every storage vendor. So, for example, you will see here Nutanix cluster IP address, Nutanix Prism username, and etc. Right? This would be different to a NetApp environment. This would be different for a VMAX environment. This would be different for a HP environment, right? So, but the important point here is, unless you have, for example, let's say NetApp, if you don't have the cluster peering, if you don't have the SVM peering, if you don't have the snap mirror relationships, or then when you come here, it won't work, right? So that bit has to get configured first, and then network mapping, folder mapping. These things I will have a different video that very specifically talks about the significance of these elements, right? But what I just want to show you is, at the moment we have a working environment, right? So now I'll just go into the protection group. So I have one protection group, right? uh, and then I have one recovery plan. So effectively, at a very high level, again, I'll have a different video to explain all this stuff. The protection group is where you select which VMs you want to protect. Now, one important thing you need to remember is, when you're using storage-based replication, you are protecting at the data store layer. So you cannot select individual VMs. If you want to use individual VMs, there are tools. Like, for example, instead of using this storage-based replication, the VMware has a free, what's called a VMware replicator. That's Appliance, and that, if you're using that as your replication engine, similar to what we're doing in the SRA adapter, then you can select VM. So you cannot have in storage-based replication. If you're using storage-based replication for SRA, you cannot have it has to be replicated at the data store layer, right? So in here, what you can do is, I'll just call it, Nutanix protection group 01. This can be, application 001, something, application 002, something, right? And all the VMs that belongs to that application will be on that protection group. So, for example, in here I only have a single VM, right? Later on I will, after the upgrade, I will pull another VM in here. Now, this VM very specifically sits on a data store, right? So the point here is, your protection groups are based on data stores, and then you go recovery plans. At the moment, I have one recovery plan, right? So, for example, you could have recovery plan for application 1, recovery plan for application 2, recovery plan for application 3, right? The good thing in the recovery plans, then you could have a recovery plan with application 1, 2, and 3 together, right? So application 1 recovery plan, 2 recovery plan, and 3 application recovery plan 3 could be a situation where you want to do a DR, or you want to do a failover specifically for the application, because DR doesn't mean necessarily, that's the last scenario, where the entire data center goes down. Most of the time what happens is, DR happens because of human error by a application. Somebody made a mistake in somewhere, and it's taking time to identify the issue with the application, troubleshooting that, and the organization have decided, no, we cannot wait any longer, please invoke DR for this specific application only. So then you need to have your infrastructure ready. You can't fall back to say, my contract doesn't say that, or my contract says the entire data. So, that's in my cock and bull. I don't know if that's the right word, right? One thing is to have a contract which says this is how you got to do stuff, right? The other thing is to have the relationship with the customer. We're dealing with humans, right? So this gives you the ability to have application-based recovery plans, and then you have a full data center based recovery plan. So effectively, you pull all these application-based recovery plans into the data center recovery plan, and then in an instance where entire data center needs to be failed over, you execute the data center recovery plan. Whereas if you want to execute the application based, then you just execute the application based one. So Now, as you guys told you, right? If I went there, I think I showed you the virtual machines. That's a virtual machine, right? So if I go to my vCenter, you will see. So you see that's a one of the uh, that's a Windows 2019 server which is running on my production side, which is in that recovery plan protection group. And then if I look on the VR side, what you will see is a placeholder. Now, when you create the recovery plan and the protection group, and when it succeeds creating that, one of the steps within that process, it goes and create that placeholder on the target side. That placeholder effectively has very basic information, the VM name, where the data stored, just so that it can initiate that failover. Now you see there's a kind of a different icon here, so pay attention to that small, three triangles. And if you look at the production one, you don't see that. So when you see these kind of icons, that indicate it's a placeholder, right? So now, as you can see, it is shut down, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go and execute the recovery plan, right? So the purpose of doing this exercise is just to prove you before going through the upgrade process. This is for my colleague, right? Before going through the upgrade process, your environment works. Don't go and start an upgrade if your production environment is broken or has a whole lot of errors. Now, so in a large environment, you could see vCenter errors, right? Because of other errors. Sometimes if it's a very large environment, you might not be able to make it 100% clean before you, but you at least need to confirm that your SRM work environment is functional, because otherwise what's going to happen is if the after you finish the, let's assume that it's broken, you go through the upgrade process, then you're trying to execute a recovery plan, it doesn't work. Now you don't know whether you broke it or your work broke it or it was broken before. So my strongest advice is don't just go and place next and just sort of think it's going to work. Do your preparation. I'm a person who sort of have 90% time spent on preparation, and then my execution is 10%, right? Go smoothly. If you go the other way around, your troubleshooting and completion will get absolutely messy. So my point here is uh, uh, confirm that your existing environment works before you start doing the product upgrades. So that's what we are effectively trying to do here, right? So now there's two. I'm not going to go into details about how SRM works in this this video. I'll have a different video published in my blog at some time in the near future. So what we are doing is we are running what's called a test. So what this test effectively does is it will take a snapshot of the time of execution. It will replicate that. It will move that snapshot onto the far side, or the side that you're trying to fail over. It will play. It will play that snapshot on the other side, and it will mount. It will merge the changes into the far side, right? Because you got to do that anyway, right? Production data gets replicated to the DR side. It will play that or merge that snapshot into the far side, storage environment. Then it will take a snapshot, right? And it will mount the snapshot, right? So I just want to show you a few things before I start that. So if you have a look in here, right, you see the data store, right? If I go to this VM and if I go to the data store, you will see Nutanix data store 01. That's where. Now, if I go to the far side, right, and I go and look at this Nutanix cluster and go, you see, and I go to, shouldn't have, okay, that's fine. You don't see that data store. Nutanix data store 01, you don't see that data store. What you will see is after the failover is done or the test is done, you will see that data store has got mounted on this side, right? So now let's quickly go through, right? I mean, already it's gone half an hour and I haven't even started up my upgrade. But I hope this information adds some value to yourself, right? So now we go test. Now, this is where you could say in production or test environment, replicate the recent changes to the recovery side. Like if you don't do this, right, then it won't take a snapshot and move the snapshot and merge the changes on the other side. What it will do is whatever is there at that point in time, it will bring up it will boot with whatever is there. So the scenario there is if you have a schedule of replicating once a day, then your day, the VM that's going to come up on the far side is going to be 1 day old. Or if you're replicating once an hour, then your far side is could be 1 hour behind. So by keeping this, right, I like to keep this. It does two things. One thing is it will replicate all the changes, and also it confirms that your application backend storage infrastructure is functioning well. So I would recommend you to do this now. But in a real DR situation you won't be able to do this. That's fine. That's understood, right? In a real DR situation, if your production site or the active site is dead, then you don't you this won't it will still let you proceed. uh, but in a test, or a DR test scenario, whether it's a bubble, some organizations do what's called a bubble test. I kind of don't understand the concept of a bubble test, right? That effectively means that you don't have your full infrastructure in place. That's why you do a bubble test, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, there's sometimes reasons for bubble tests, but anyway, that's a different conversation. I will have a strategy, video at some point in the future, and then I'll sort of, we can talk about, uh, some of these things, how some certain environments function, and what are the pros and cons on those things, right? So anyway, let's keep going. Okay, so now it just tells you what's getting moved, and we just do finish, right? And then normally what I do is now I just keep an eye on the recovery steps. Now, because I said at the beginning, replicate the latest changes. Now this step is effectively doing the replication. Now in the Nutanix world, Nutanix is a Nutanix replication. If you have a snappy relationship, for in the context of NetApp, it will be doing that. It will be doing taking a snapshot, replicating it across, right? So I have seen some organizations where they'll do their bubble test and they'll say, before the Windows or the ESXi team starts doing their work, can the storage team do a final replication? You don't have to do this, right? Because if you do this step, it effectively moves the data, right? So now, if there are any problems, it will fail here. So that bit is done now. Now it's creating a writable storage snapshot. So this is where the backend storage is now creating a snapshot on the far side so that it can be mounted uh, uh, into the ESXi environment, right? So, in a different context, if let's say you didn't have SRM, all these are steps that a storage engineer would have had to get involved and manually do it, right? So effectively, so that's done now, and now they are effectively powering on the VMs, right? I mean, there's a lot more you can do in this environment. Like, you can customize. So you can customize to the extent that uh, you can prioritize which VMs needs to come up first. For example, let's say, you want your domain controllers, DNS servers, it needs to come up first. Then you need your database servers to come up second because, database service needs authentication, right? And then at the later stage, you want your applications to come up. You can do that. If you want to re-IP environment, if you want to have a different set of IP addresses, that can be done as well. So yeah, I'm intending to sort of produce sort of a video in my blog, or on YouTube as well at some point. I'm doing this, I'm making this very generic as possible so that I can eventually publish these things on it. So at this point in time, it says test completed. And now if you go back to Sydney one, it's still running because we ran a test. So the production people are still doing their work, no implications. Now you go into the DR side and you will say it's running, right? Now it's running with the same IP address. Now you might wonder, how's that? What it's effectively doing is, again, this will be, demonstrated to you in a later, very specifically SRM, failover scenario video. But effectively, it created a dummy virtual switch. Yeah, it's a virtual switch, and it has no uplinks. So it's effectively a segregated LAN. So there is no IP conflicts, right? So now, just the quick last thing I want to show is now if I go to data stores, right, you will see this data store there. If I go to the cluster and data stores, you will see that this data. So previously it wasn't there, right? So now, that's done, right? So now let's go back to the site recovery manager, and let's say I want to now turn DR exercise is finished, DR is finished, or in a real DR you won't do a DR in a test, right? You will do what's called a run. So now I'm going to effectively dismantle that DR environment right now, just shut them down. So what you do is you just run a cleanup and just go next. I just want to show you something here right now. You see there is a force cleanup and it's grayed out. You will see that in the first instance. Now, if I do a next, it will go and clean up. For some reason that if the cleanup fails, right, now you're in a situation where you can't execute for the DRs, right? It gives you the force cleanup option where it will dismantle the failover environment, even though the first instance didn't work. That is, so that happens when, for example, if let's say your production site is down and you want to do a cleanup, and the infrastructure hasn't still been set up on the production site, and so when you do a cleanup, it needs to talk back to your, in the opposite direction, and sort of make sure the storage is cleaned up first, snapshots are deleted, etc. And if there are problems in your storage environment, backend storage environment, that might not work. So that's why this force cleanup is there, right? So just remember, if your cleanup doesn't work, go and do a cleanup again, and next time you will be able to enable this. So I go next, and again you can go to the recovery steps, and you will see what happens, right? So yeah, so that's all done. And if I go here, that data store is gone. If I go shut down, yep, and yeah, that's effectively done, right? So just to let you know, if you're doing a real failover, that is when you will do a run. Please be very careful in using this run, because this is a destructive operation. You will effectively shut down production environment and move it across the DR side. So I mean, I wish I won't run it, right? So you see the giving you a lot of bells and whistles to be very careful, right? I wish there was a little bit of another step where you could have to give authentication, or two people verifying that ready to go, something like that, some process. So if you want to do a real DR, if real failover, meaning shut the production VMs and failover onto the other side, that's when you will do a run. Again, I will have a different video for that. So that effectively now sort of concludes my demonstrating the existing environment. Now, I'm sorry that it took so long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, come back, and then in the next step is where I will show you. We'll go through the migration. Now I want to show you. So I have what's called SRM upgrade steps for Nutanix. Like, I mean, any of you guys can pick up this. There's nothing. This is all publicly available stuff. So again, I would emphasize 90% do the preparation, 10% is execution time. If you are not doing that, then you got to ask yourself, are you functioning in an enterprise environment? We are these tools are used in enterprise environments. If you're not having that 90 to 10, or maybe at least 80 to 20 preparation, 80%, 20% execution, right? If you don't have that mind frame, if you don't have that, you got to question: Are you working in enterprise environment? Because the implications of something going wrong is massive for an enterprise. Now, if you are a corner shop or a 7-Eleven, even a 7-Eleven is an enterprise, right? If for it, go for it. If you're doing this on a test lab, but please get used to having that thinking, that culture where you're spend more time preparing and then execution goes smoothly, right? So for that purpose, I have detailed steps, pre-preparation, I would say, and preparation, right? And then I emphasize, some of this important stuff. For example, some environments don't let you access, 5480. So 5480 is VMware's Photon's management port. So if you have a vCenter, you access the vCenter using, everybody accesses vCenter using 443. But if you want to manage the vCenter appliance, you hit it through 5480. So 5480 is generally protected. That's a very good practice, right? So most of the organizations don't have 5480 open from, let's say, their management environment, or let's say some people have management clusters, jumbo clusters. That is not open. So your environment could be the same. So the reason I put this in here is for my colleague to, because at the moment he's using a Windows environment, right? So he'll just do RDP, or he'll just go to the appliance and do sorry, he'll use the console, right? But you can't use the console for SRM. The functionality that is required to do an upgrade, to proceed, is not there. You have to hit the 5480. Now, after you deploy the appliance, if your Jumpbox environment doesn't allow you to hit 5480, then your upgrade is stuck. So that's why you need to do these preparation steps before. This is where I'm emphasizing, right, that your 80% preparation is done. So if you, before your change starts, if you have done this, you won't have a problem. If you start the change and you realize, oh shit, I'm sorry, 5480 is not open. Now suddenly, you got to create new changes. Suddenly, you most likely your change is going to be a failed change, right? And it could have implications, your SLAs, etc., etc. So that's why I keep emphasizing, look at all options, make sure that preparation work is done. And then here I have sort of, detailed steps on, the upgrade process. Now I'm not going to go through this, but but I'll come back in the next session, and then we will go through the process of upgrading. I'm just going to stop the video for now. Hi guys, so now let's start that upgrade process that we discussed before, all that. So effectively, so I have these detailed steps, right, previously. Now I want to say something here. Now this link has, one of the guys have published very good instruction. So I don't have to reinvent, I've effectively taken the brains, or the important stuff this blogger has published, and I have sort of customized a few things that I've added some of my best practices, some common sense things that you need to use, that this one of my this internet colleague has sort of didn't go into that details, because he doesn't have to. Some of these steps that I mentioned, 90% preparation, 10% execution, taking backups, taking snapshots, etc., etc. These are should be common practice, of part of your IT value structure, best practices, so but in case some environments can't access internet, so I have effectively published this on my OneNote as well, right? So effectively taken a copy of that, in case, because I'll be providing this entire OneNote details and if possible the video as well to my colleague so that it hopefully helps him, right? So sort of I have it here, but I also want to say always acknowledge the contribution, right? Sorry about my English. The contribution from your global intellectual lead. Without them, we would not be where we are today. The reason I'm saying this is, we talk about, plagiarism, copying other people's work, always acknowledge other people's work because without them, without the internet, without the Google, without the YouTubes, we would not have this, unbelievable, IT, people say after the Industrial Revolution, this is the biggest revolution. Some people say we made a 100-year or maybe even 150-year leap in productivity or gain in the last 20 years. And I would very much agree. And there are some references where it says our days are 7 times faster. What it effectively means is your today 1 day 24 hours is actually worth 7 days because that's how fast. So if you are not acquiring your knowledge, your expertise at that rate, you're effectively going to go behind 7 years compared to another person who's developing his knowledge and expertise. And right around the world, people like you and me are doing that. So if we don't catch up to that 1-to-7 ratio, very soon we'll be left behind. So that's just a philosophical bit of my apologies. If you don't disagree, that's I understand that. Anyway, so that was just to make a reference to that. Some of this information was obtained from one of my internet colleagues. So I just want to say thank you for that. I will mention his name in a future video. Okay, so now we're going to go. This is what we're going to do in this session of the video. How to export the Windows SRM configuration, deploy the SRM 8.3 Photon appliance, import the SRM configuration downloaded from the Windows SRM. So that came from the first step. Reconnect the new SRM appliance back to the vCenter and test the original recorded plan. So that's what I want to achieve in this instance. And then we will step through 8.4, 8.5 and effective validation, right? So now, so let's do that now. So effectively, let's go into one of the Windows. So I'm going to Sydney instance. I mean, I could have done a RDP, but I'll just use the console here. Yep. So this is something I kind of tested before. Let me sort of. Okay, so I'm going to lean onto his piece of nice work. So let me see if I can find. So in his blog, it says, these are steps, right? First is stop the SRM services in the Windows SRM server. Export the SRM data from Windows SRM server, right? This is a very important step, right? So what we are effectively doing is, now I may have had all the things, so let's go in here. So these services are running, right? Now you want to stop these services, right? So I will sort of stop. While that's happening, I will just leave it like that. Realize you cannot copy from there, so I'll just let it run. I will take it from here, which I should be able to. Okay, that's one of the services stopped. Let's stop the other one and the last one. Right, just confirm it stopped, and it's not going to start it automatically. Right, so now this one again. So as per his instructions, right? So let me start from scratch here. So you open a command shell and you cd onto that folder where SRM is installed, right? And then you run this export and you define the folder. So for example, here I already have a, I would say SRM export. Oops. Oh, sorry, can't copy from there, right? I would say SRM export 02. So I'm on that side now, and what you will see is you don't have to have the folder created. It will create that folder when you do that, right? So let me pull this down a bit so that you can see that. Let's take this out. Export. If we do that, export. SRM bad. I'll go C:/S SRM E 02. Okay, let me have a look why that happened. Just give me 1 minute. Hi guys, yeah, sorry. In the previous instance, I made a mistake. I was only supposed to stop this VMware Site Recovery Manager server, not the client and the database. That's why it was error came, right? So let's give that's an all export. So let's now go to the folder. I think I could be already in that folder. Yep. So now I'm going to export that. Right. Run the command. So now it will ask you for a password, right? This is a password, just so that nobody can go and get your configuration. So this is any password, but just make sure you remember the password, right? So it's whatever. And to ask again for SRA credentials. So this is again any password, but it's effectively storing the SRA credentials in a file, right? So that's done now. So effectively now, if I go there, and this is the folder that will be required. All this content is required later when you want to import after you deploy the SRM appliance version. So now you effectively need to copy this out, right? So I have a folder in one of my shares called SRM exports. This is the server, so make sure you prefix your backups from the server name. Now I would just put 0204 23A in case I have to do it again for whatever reason. And so I will just copy the entire folder, right? Yeah, so that's done, right? So now what I will do is I will effectively shut this VM down. Shut down. Doesn't matter. Don't know whether it will give me time to save this. Okay, so I need it again. So close these things and let's try white shut down, continue, shut down anyway. Okay, so that host is going down, and now while that's going down, let's connect to the Canberra SRM server. I mean, one export is enough, but I would prefer to do it because it will have everything you require, right? So I'm gonna go just 1 minute, very short memory. I don't want okay, so let's see. Yeah, so that's where I want to be. Go export SRM bat, and again we'll colon SRM exp 02. I will just keep the same same password so that I don't get confused. Yep, that's all good. Yep, that's all there. Now I will move back to what? And this is Canberra. So my naming convention is the 3 letters of the international airport, followed by, if it's only one site, I would have a Canberra Central. If it has multiple data centers, I would say Canberra and then the first letter of the street, something like that. You got, each organization has their own naming convention, right? So that's a Canberra 1020423. Just to keep update. Got that. And then put it there. Okay, so now something very interesting. It did not complain. That's an oversight by me. These are things that, so I'd like to have shortcut here. I did not shut that service down. I think I'm going to do this again. So I think it's Right. Stop. Now, one thing I'm not familiar sure is, my internet colleague, where what he's published, how old that is, and things may have changed, right? So what I'm going to do here is, that's my, let's say, ./old, right? And I'm going to run these commands again, just so that, should I say first? So that's okay, so old, right? And I run this again, just to be on the safe side. The good thing is, after you deploy, if you run into problems, you'll still have the Windows instance, where you can boot it up. But okay, I probably started this too early, so I'm going to exit this again. No, okay, I'm gonna, because I started going this path too early, right? So I don't want to. Not sure the database had started by the time I executed the command. So I'll just oh, it has properly shut down. So I'm just going to close that. And I'm going to go back to folder. Of course. And I think I'll rename this. Okay. That's the one which got halfway created. I gotta delete that. And let's try again, just to make sure. It's a little bit worried when it took longer than it should in terms of, for the second password prompt to come up. Okay. Yeah, that's what I kind of expect. Okay, that bit is done. Let's see what I can see here. So SRM export, that's 2. Looks okay. What's this one? Okay, now I'm just going to call this old, and I'm going to create the new folder again. That's why I put an A actually. I should use a B now, but anyway, just keep it consistent with the first one. So we got that. That's the new one. Let's do that. Yep. So all that is good. Okay, I'm going to shut this SRM Windows version server down now. And the next one is now, let's go back to, so we've done this one. Now the next one is deploying SRM Photon Appliance. So I'll just take a quick break.